Hey guys, welcome to Studio Time, and we have some really special episodes for you because Terminator Dark Fate comes out this weekend. I'm very excited to be working on this film, have been working on this film, I should say. It was a 9-month period in total working on it. I started making music December last year, and I pretty much finished the score somewhere in late August. So it's been a very interesting 9 months, a lot of work. It's a really great movie. And I wanted to tell you a little bit what I did for this movie. So for starters, as you guys may know, this is the first time since 1991, which is 2001, it's almost like 20-something years, that Cameron is back on this as a producer, Arnold Schwarzenegger is back, and Linda Hamilton is back, plus a bunch of really other amazing cast. So that makes it very special that this is the third Terminator where that cast is together. And lastly, I would mention this movie is directed by Tim Miller, who had an incredible influence on how this movie was going to turn out. And obviously, for people who know Tim Miller, I worked with before on the first Deadpool movie. So we know each other really well, and I know what he likes to hear, and he knows exactly what he's gonna, what he can expect coming from me. So knowing that Linda Hamilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger are back on this, and it really feels like the third Terminator. So we have Terminator 1 from 1984, if I believe, and then the second Terminator from 1991, and this is the third. So for argument's sake, let's forget about all the other Terminator movies that were made in between. So what was important for me musically, that I would pay a proper homage to the original score done for the first two Terminators by Brad Fiedel. And so I used the original theme on various different spots in the movie, and obviously the signature rhythm, the ra-down, down, da down. It just makes people happy, you know, when they hear that music again. And it was really great to use those elements in the score. And I was honestly thinking, why reinvent the wheel when we have something so great that really fits in this movie? So the thing I want to focus on first in this first episode is what I called the Phoenix was the code name actually for Terminator Dark Fate. And this is the theme Spinoff, which is my version of the theme. So there are a lot of different music elements in this version. I will talk about that later. And what we're now going to focus on is not the final result, which we have done in the past, and we will do that for some of the other videos for different cues and other themes. In this case, I want to focus on the first demo that I sent out, which is also interesting. So you guys can hear what I send out to the directors and the producers and the studios, Paramount and Fox, who were involved in this film. So again, what we're now going to play is the first demo that I finished and send out to them. Okay, let's play it, and then we're going to talk about it. Okay, that's it. The John Williams fans among you are gonna absolutely hate this score because there's so much noise in this score. So much noise, which I call controlled noise, and I love it, personally. So, let's talk a little bit about what this thing is. Obviously, this is my take on the original theme, but you're hearing so many of these other elements, and let me explain why these elements are in there. So, you hear a lot of Spanish guitars, and you also hear in the brass that the voicing of the trumpets with horns almost feels like mariachi. So why is that? Well, most of the movie takes place in Mexico, and a little bit takes place in the US, in El Paso. And there are extra characters in this movie that are Latino actors, and it starts in Mexico City, and then it takes place in Mexico. And I'm not going to tell you too much about it, but it's a pretty much full Latino cast, except for Linda Hamilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and a third protagonist called Grace. We'll get to that later. So I added a lot of Spanish guitar to this, but I kept the original theme. But when the Spanish guitar starts playing, it's a take on the theme. It's not the exact same theme, but it's my interpretation of it. Obviously there's a lot of percussion in there, there's metal in there, a lot of sound design where the theme is being played with, so we'll also talk about that. There will be a separate episode on Terminator Dark Fate, the sounds, and I'm really going in specific on where these sounds come from, how they're made, so we'll get to that more in detail. So let's investigate some of these sounds here, and at the very end of this episode I will open up the mix session, and then I'll play the final result as it actually appears in the film, fully mixed with live recordings, everything. So we'll get to that in a little bit. So let's just go through this episode. So there's a bunch of sound design sounds here. Let's go through a couple. So this is made with a modular. We'll get to that in a different episode. Also made with a modular. Also made with a modular. So there's a bunch of these synth sounds that happen at the same time. That one too. Here we have some shimmery sounds. So this is actually a metal storage rack that we have in the garage, and I just like yanked it with a piece of metal, so you get like ring, that sound, and we did a bunch of sound design on it, and that became this particular sound. Let's see, let's scroll down. We see some sounds here. Let's solo that. So that's where the big drum section hits. So, since it's Terminator, and the original score had a lot of metal-y type of sounds done with old samplers and with old synthesizers, this is like a modern version of it. So these are sound design elements done on top of metal clangs and all kinds of stuff that we had, even stuff that I have in the template, and just do sound design on it to create these sounds uniquely for this film. So the next couple of tracks that we see here, which also happens in this same theme, are the Spanish guitars. So a section of it is programmed, and the other section I actually played live. So I'm not the greatest guitar player on the planet at all, but if I take time to practice it, and if I can record 2-3 bars at the time, and then stop, and then do the other 2-3, I actually sound pretty decent. So I had a lot of fun playing a lot of guitar on this score. In the initial version of the theme, I had it programmed. So this is a flamenco guitar that I sampled myself. So the guitar is like right over there. We'll break it out later, and I'll play a little bit on it. But so this is the instrument, and I really wanted to capture like the real nature of that instrument. So it's a really nice instrument to program some stuff, and it took us forever to sample this thing, but I just love making these unique instruments, you know, for a film. So I programmed this thing that eventually was going to turn out into the main theme of Danny, which is the young girl who will become the heroine eventually of this film. But let's just play what I programmed. So that's the spin I took on the theme. So the original theme is... That's the original theme, and what I did is... Oh, sorry, I just have to look at the notes. So I'm just playing with the notes a little bit, but it's still... It still comes from that same family, but just a little bit more Spanish, if you will. So those are the programmed guitars that I later would replace with actually live playing. And like I said, since I cannot play everything at the same time, I basically split it up in different parts, and this potentially I can play if I practice enough. So I could potentially play that, and then the other lick that goes against that is this one. I could potentially play that. And then we have the last part, which is this. So now when we play them together, we get this really nice playing off these three guitars like against each other, also in the stereo image. So let's play one more time. And now it almost sounds like a guitar player who knows what he's doing. So it's a cool way to do it like that. But I did record a bunch of live guitars in the original suite. So let's go there. Here we are. So these are actually the strum chords that go with the main theme. So this is what that became. And why do you see like different blocks of recording here is that I actually had to detune the guitar for almost every chord because I wanted that low C in every chord. So the guitar is completely tuned in a different tuning with all the chords on top, and that's why I had to actually detune the guitar a little bit because there were some chords I simply couldn't play, so I tuned the guitar so I was able to play it. So beautiful of multi-track recording. So that's the day and age that we live in. So now let's jump to another guitar part that I played, which is the theme. So I replaced it, the program guitar later on in the theme. So let's check what I recorded. So there you have it. That's the original theme, but I recorded it on the Spanish guitar. Let's see. Oh, the other thing that's really cool is since December last year, I started buying string instruments because I really wanted to learn how to play the string instruments, but also to have fun with them. So I got a violin, I got a viola, I got a cello and a bass that you see behind me. So immediately I started using the cello and the bass into this recording. There's a couple of sounds I made with it. So let's just see what I recorded. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. So I only played for a few weeks at that point, but I had a lot of fun recording it. And I was treating the cello and the bass very rough. I don't think I could pay a cello player or a bass player enough to beat up their instruments so bad as I did. I went through a couple of boats to record it, but it was fun and the sound was great. So that's the riff that I recorded, and I really dragged the bow over the instruments to get that sound. I'll explain that in a separate video, how we got that. Let's see, then there's a bunch of live drums recording in there, and also a bunch of anvil sounds, obviously, because it's Terminator. So let's just listen to what I have here. So these are typical homemade recordings, like banging on stuff and just processing them and just to use them in this track. Let's see, what else do we see here? So some live drums recordings that I played. We'll get to that also separately. Let's play a little bit of the program drums that goes with it. So the program drums are the drum libraries that I've made myself. I featured them multiple times in various videos, like how I made them. There's one episode of Studio Time in season 1, the drums of Mad Max. So let me play the rhythm that I programmed and play it live at the same time, so you have an idea what that sounds like. Never get tired listening of those drums. So that's the drum department. Here we go into the metal department, and for people that have that remember that, I actually recorded for Mortal Engines a lot of stuff in a tank that was next to the office of Peter Jackson. And he basically brought in all the metal and all the props that they used for Mortal Engines in there. And I sampled the hell out of them. And even though I used a lot in Mortal Engines, there are a lot of sounds that I didn't use. And they were so perfect for Terminator. So let's play some of these sounds. Now these sounds mix really, really well with the toms that sound, you know, like toms. And with the metal on top, they get that really metallic clang to it, which makes it extra aggressive, which is really cool. Let's go back up again, because there's also a bunch of live recordings of actually bass guitars. And these also sound really, really cool. So we'll get to that also separately, but this is my Fender bass going through a Fender Bassman amp, really cranked up, so it really starts getting crunchy and distorty. So let's see what that sounds like. So the bass is tuned down to C, and I'm really slamming it, so to get that really, really aggressive sound out of it. So this is, you know, one of the reasons why I call myself full contact composer, because, you know, I was able to play distortion bass, I was able to play electric guitar and feedback guitars, I was able to make crazy noises on my modular system and turn it into instruments. I sampled a flamenco guitar and then used that and then played it. I played drums on this thing. I was hitting metal objects in this score. I played the stand-up bass. I played the cello. I made weird noises with the violin. I mean, it's a dream come true for me to play with all these instruments and really have fun with them and just, you know, use them in this film score. This is interesting because when the theme starts in the beginning of this piece, the main sound that actually plays that theme, it's played on the bass guitar, and then I tuned it up. So I recorded the bass guitar and then I pitched it up by an octave to get this really artificial grainalizing sound, and then I used a bunch of effects on it. So this is actually the main ingredient of that theme. So let's just play a little bit of that. So it's recorded with a big muff, with a huge amount of distortion, and the amp was really loud, so you constantly hear like it wants to start feedback, you know, just on the bass guitar, but there's so much distortion on it that the sustain is incredible. Now there's another sound design instrument that goes with it in the suite, which also is derived from a bass guitar, which is this thing right here. So now I'm going to play the bass guitar that we just played, together with these two sound design instruments. And let's just see what that sounds like. Here we go. So I'm going to play that same section again. So you get the directness of the bass guitars, and then that other sound just really sits nicely behind it. Now the other sound that I added to this is a sound design brass instrument that is made out of guitars. So now I'm playing that sound on top of the two other sounds, and now it sounds like this. So it gets even wider and washier, and now the last thing I added is a little bit of French horns. So I also want to add that to it, and now we have the complete sound of the theme. So let's play it one more time. And now I want to play that same section, but then with everything else with it. So you hear how nice all those combination of sounds sit in the mix. So it's really nice to have these layers of sound playing that theme. So orchestrally, there's not all that much going on in this thing, except for that the violins at a certain point play the theme in octaves. But what is interesting is what the brass is doing when they play the theme in octaves. The horns actually play the theme in octaves, and then the trumpet plays against it. And the trumpet is giving a little bit of the mariachi feeling, not a complete mariachi feeling, but at least the sense like, oh, you know, we're not in America, we're not in Africa, we're not in Russia, we're not in Australia. This really feels like potentially Mexico. So let me play a little bit of that, how that sounds. So that trumpet gives it like a little bit of extra spice to it. But we should really listen to how this was played with the live players. And we had an insane brass section for this group. I think we had 32 brass players. It was incredible. What a sound. So now that we went through this particular piece of music with the different elements in there that I programmed and the sounds that I came up with, let's just now open up the mix session, and then I'll play a couple of these things in the mix session, and then we're going to play the final result of that one more time, and that will then conclude the end of this episode. So let me load up that mix session. Okay guys, we have the mix session open, which has also now the live recordings in it from the brass and the string section. I just want to solo a little bit of the brass guys when the trumpets come in, so you can hear like how great that sound is of just the whole brass group. I mean, come on, that's like an incredible, fantastic sound. We recorded it actually at Fox, and the same for the strings. So in this mix, everything is now bounced out that we just saw in the previous Cubase session, and sounds are now also combined into one stem, because otherwise you would send way too many stems to the mix, which would be too much. The final mix of the film, I would say. So this is the mix of that thing that I just played, and I just want to now play it from beginning to end, so you could hear exactly how it is sounding in the film. So here we go. And that was that, guys. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon. on the next Studio Time about Terminator Dark Fate. Thank you.